Hello, this is a quick demonstration of XT2, Metropolis's telemanagement and call detail reporting solution. XT2 is a web-based application, meaning an unlimited number of users can log into XT2 from a browser. First thing that you'll notice, I'm logged in as an admin, so I can show you what all the different features and configuration of the software. To add other users, very simple. Go to the toolbar on the left-hand side, select users, and then the web user pop-up will display. As you'll notice, I have just this one admin user that has access to the software. But if I needed to set up other users, it's very simple. I just give that user a name, user ID, and password, and then give them a permission. Maybe that's a report-only user, like a least privileged access role-based user that could just pull reports for extensions or for a specific type of report, or from within a specific department or location. Why is that really important? Well, first, maybe they don't need access to all of the different templates. This is just a user that pulls an extension detail or dial number detail report. Every so often they need to use the software. So it makes it much easier to understand and use. You could also enable other hierarchy levels. You'll notice I've only enabled 2 different groupings, department and location, but I can add those as needed. There's also LDAP authentication to support signing into XT over the web with your Windows credentials. Since I'm logged in as an administrator, I can again go back and show you what the different dashboards are displayed in the different widgets here. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, something new is trending. So this is comparing the current time period versus previous time period, right? So this can be very helpful in noticing on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, wow, why did calls drop off substantially today at 2 o'clock, whereas yesterday we stayed consistent across the entire day? Maybe there's some issue with the phone system, employees aren't in the office, or not making telephone phone calls. Same with the trunk utilization. You'll notice here we're assessing peak concurrent trunk utilization by trunk group. Here's a couple of them, a session border control and SIP trunk, to where I can see the session border control peaked at 5 concurrent calls today. All right. Also, looks like the SBC, we only peaked at 4 concurrent calls. So again, comparing 2 different types of trunks, and then trending would come into play when you zoom in and pull this information up on a current calls or current trend versus previous trend, to where I can see, okay, last period we peaked at 5 concurrent calls on my SIP trunk. Let's make sure that we have at least 5 current calls in bandwidth this period. So very useful for resource planning around concurrent call activity. In the lower right-hand corner of the screen is the infamous hotspot map, where we can plot calls on a world map and drill into outliers, like, okay, why was there a call placed to Africa? Let's ensure that that call was legitimate, because this can be an identifier on toll fraud. It could be an identifier on, again, employee phone abuse, especially with these remote home workers. A lot of times there's vulnerabilities on their home PCs. Someone gains access to that soft phone on their PC or desk phone and is able to get an outside line, and before you know it, you're hit with a huge telecom bill, and you're scrambling to find a solution like XT to not only give you that visual identification on potential toll fraud, but alert. All right, we'll get into alerts in a minute. Let's cover the rest of the dashboard. There's a live view, which you can drill into, maybe to the top 10 dial, top 10 received, top 10 most expensive, top 10 most used, and then alarms, right? You can also right-click on these other graphs to maybe break down calls in a bar chart or pie chart. These gauges on the upper part of the screen give you the ability to notice current versus previous based on date and time ranges here. So if you'll notice, maybe this is a sales department and you want to ensure that they hit a certain amount of calls over the course of day, which would be representative by the previous period. Well, we're close. We're at 6,286, but there's still 3,000 net calls needed to be made over the course of the day to meet that previous trend, right? Other use cases could be internal calls or previous calls or international calls. So if you'll notice, okay, we had 873 international calls during the previous period. You start to notice thousands of international calls. That could be another instance of toll fraud, right? So again, very handy. You can drill into these as well. I just simply click and see over the course of the day all those previous outbound calls or all those calls today, as well as the ability to filter by the relevant department or group, right? This doesn't have to be a department. This is just a group of directory numbers or extensions. So maybe you call them teams, right? Maybe you call them sites. Maybe they're called divisions, so on. So again, I selected 8 different departments to filter my dashboard widgets here, right? Now that we discussed dashboard, let's move into alarms. So there's a few different types. You'll notice that we have PBX inactive or UC inactive, to where we're providing a pop-up and email if we stop collecting data from your unified communication solution. All right, so maybe that's if no calls are made or received in 60 minutes. Again, no CDRs being received for 60 minutes. We'll provide that pop-up and email letting you know the Office Watch software has stopped collecting data from your main site. Why is that really important? Well, if Office Watch is not collecting data, not only are reports not going to be accurate, but we're not going to be able to provide the time-sensitive notifications on an emergency dial or other use case like toll fraud. So if you'll notice, call alarms is a more broader view of different types of alarms that could be configured. A few examples could be emergency. Highly encouraged to set up an emergency alert if 911 or 9911 were to be dialed. Let's look at some of the different thresholds here. So 911, which is designated as an emergency call class, is dialed. I also set up 9911 as an emergency call class. So if either one of those are dialed, that's over maybe 5 seconds, right? Because you just want true emergencies as opposed to missed dials. Or maybe it's anytime 911 is dialed, because a lot of times someone will pick up the phone and hang it up immediately, not realizing they called the police, and they'll come to the office and you'll be fined. So again, you could set this up anytime 911 is called, regardless of the duration of the call. Here's where I'm defining the parameters that come across in the body of the email and in the body of the email, and then also the parameters, right? So from the Office Watch directory where the extensions reside, there's parameters like an extension, a name, a department that extension is associated to. Maybe it's a special note. With all the remote workers, often we'll find that 911 is dialed from a home. Last thing you want is think that this is someone at your office. So when police call back, like somebody hurting in need of emergency, at least you know right away that that's a remote worker as opposed to someone within your offices, right? As well as a text message, right? So if you're not set up to receive this email, or maybe you want to complement the email with an SMS message showing up on a smartphone, you're just entering in the mobile telephone number carrier and the message that you want to display. All right, so again, these are just some of the options that are available from pop-up email and text message. You can get really creative with this if you'd like to display this alert in various different applications as it goes out via email and text. You can also set up these alerts to be delivered just for specific sites. So assuming you have, maybe it's a school district, right? And you have multiple high schools that are part of the same phone system, but you don't want to alert everybody if 911's dialed, just the security of that school. And you can set up site-specific notifications to where just someone within the specific site is called. Okay, so and that's one example of alarms, which is the most frequently used alarm, again, is emergency. But other instances of expensive, I think that's the next most important or often used alarm, to where anytime an expensive call or international call over a specific cost or duration is dialed, you receive that immediate notification, so you're not stuck with this huge carrier bill when very expensive phone calls have been made over the course of maybe several days, and you're looking at your bill like, oh, why didn't you notify us earlier? Well, maybe the carrier has an incentive to not bill you earlier and shut down your call traffic. Right, so this will often happen to customers where someone will somehow get an outside line through the auto attendant, right, or employee phone abuse, or finally that remote worker vulnerability on that soft phone or their home-based phone getting subject to being hacking and getting an outside line can be extremely frustrating. So again, that's an example of kind of expensive calls. Other examples here will be trunk utilization. So again, let's go back to the example of concurrent calls, tying up all your trunk lines, and you don't have the ability to make an outside line call, or customers can't call back in. Well, we can set up an alert if you receive or exceed a certain high water mark or low water mark. That's a capacity constraint. So 90% capacity on my gateway is achieved, then the concurrent trunk activity goes down below 70%. That would trigger off this alarm. So again, that fluctuation in concurrent call activity can be very helpful in noticing trending, but also if those outliers exist, we're going to alert you, so you're not always pulling up the application that is XT to determine what your concurrent call volume is, or looking at your scheduled reports, which still encourage using the alerts and looking at dashboards and reports, maybe even bringing in the concurrent trunk utilization report into your monthly IT meeting, just to make sure that you have enough resources to handle call volume. Okay, so those are alarms. We discussed the dashboards. Let's briefly show trunk utilization and how these are configured. Super simple. You have trunk definitions and trunk groups, right? So trunk definitions are identifiers received in the CDR or SMDR. So depending on what kind of phone system that you have, those could be a little bit different. Maybe it's a PRI identifier or a cube identifier, device identifier, and so on. And we receive that raw data, which you can add automatically as calls are being placed throughout the unified communication system, and then tag it to a specific name, all right, or description or group. In these examples, I tagged, you could have multiple trunk definitions assigned to the same trunk group. For example, different channels on a PRI come across as a different identifier. You're going to want to associate those identifiers or trunk definitions to a trunk group to get peak utilization by that trunk group, which could be, again, a gateway. Going into some of the reports, again, you have the ability to go to the report generator, which we have so many different templates that are available, even the ability to drill into different conditions on a template or schedule them or make custom reports. Let's go through the different options that are available here. I have the ability to set up a call report by date and time frame. So these are calls from beginning to end of day. I can also filter calls by an individual extension, range of extensions, right, or comma separated list, right? So again, you have drop downs here to make it easy for non-sequential extensions or just reporting on everybody. If you have a 10-digit dial plan, number plan, again, you can just enter in 0 through your 10 digits there, as well as filtering by the appropriate departments and divisions. So this is, again, I'm reporting on everything in this example will report, as well as filter by call class. So maybe that's internal, maybe it's inbound, outbound, by long distance, international, emergency, fixed cost service, recurring costs, that's SVC, so service charges, and then call classes that you might designate and title whatever you'd like. So maybe these are mobile telephone calls, and you want to use those or class those as other one. Again, that makes it really easy to just filter by types of phone numbers, whether or not that's a pattern of a number or a specific number or a prefix, and so on. All right, you can pull reports in multiple formats, whether or not that's HTML, Excel, CSV, or PDF on a schedule, right? So I can, again, select schedule. I can run once or memorize, right? So I'll include it here. I can choose screen or email it. If I were to select email here, it'll enable you to and run it. That will send out this report one time. Whereas if I select schedule, I can pick a date and time frame to send the report. Let's just pull this report to the screen so we have an idea on what the extension detail report looks like. And it pops up in my browser here, and I can see over the course of the day that there were over 6 hours worth of phone calls. Oh, take that back. There were over 3 hours of telephone calls placed by John Smith, average duration of 6 minutes and 38 seconds per call, with total costs that had accrued over that given interval chosen in the filter. Each one of these individual rows of data represents a call. So this first call was outgoing. We know that because it has an LOC call class and an outgoing status. This was a call, again, a 7-digit dial too. So that's another identifier there that this is likely an outbound call to someone in Las Vegas. So there's enrichment of the CDR by utilizing the exchange or npnxx to look up the different lattas that those calls are either made or received from. Whereas on the inbound call here, we see that this is someone calling in from Florida, right? And this call not only was received, but it was also going to voicemail. So you'll notice there's different types of statuses from outbound, voicemail, incoming, and so on. If we move into some of the other reports, again, this one was by extension detail. We always have summary or department detail and department summary, right? So if I wanted to report on my department activity and include all of my departments in the report, pop it up on my screen here, I could get an idea on how these departments are handling calls. From the inbound perspective, the accounting departments missed 8% of their calls today. 2% were busy and 88% of them were answered. So again, giving you a nice breakdown on inbound calls, and then total answered and total missed. Or if this is just a simple bill back report, maybe you're doing bill back by call class in a summary format, and I'm choosing all the different types of call classes that I want to pull in the report that are billable. Usually that's going to be your local toll, intrastate, long distance, international. Emergency is usually not billable. If you have fixed recurring costs, the service charges, you would leave that one enabled as well. And then you just run the report and get an idea on, okay, the accounting department, there were $14 in charges, call center, 55, and so on. Right, so again, that's breaking down by call class. I could always come back into the software and pull reports by account code. So if you are using account code, meaning digits entered into the phone system before making a dial to bill back to the appropriate customer or project, again, that's where those account code reports come in handy. Or even by hunt pilot, or hunt group. So if I wanted to report on all my hunt groups and what's my busy hour call on my sales hunt group, and I could quickly see that here. And this is breaking down calls by hour, giving you a nice visual indicator on call volume. And then where are most of my calls being missed? I could quickly see on the graph at 1 p.m. and then also maybe at 12. And at 1 p.m. and 12, there are 87 total calls. 4 of them were abandoned, right? Which is a 4% abandonment rate handled and so on. Moving into some of the other reports that are here, especially some of the newer ones. Instead of looking at the graph, remember what I showed in the beginning with your trunk utilization of your session border control and also SIP trunk, maybe you just want a quick and dirty, give me my peak trunk utilization by week on my different trunk groups, right? This can be very helpful. You're just simply going to trunk utilization by week, run the report to the screen, and I should be able to see my different trunk groups and trunks that were selected and get just a quick, easy concurrent trunk activity. So again, I could take a quick look at my PRI, right? So this is my AT&T PRI. We peaked at 13 calls. When did we peak at 13 calls? That was on July 7th at 12:31 a.m. And that was for the week of July 5th. So it can be, again, really helpful there just to make sure you have enough trunks available based on your busy hour call. Right, so again, that was a trunk report. We also have related to call volume is your call activity by hour day, your phone company audit report, so on. So something that's helpful now about XT2 is you do have the ability to use rates that are in the CDR. So if you're using maybe a UCaaS solution or rates that are associated to your carrier bill or wireless bill, where the rates are already applied and you just wanted to compare that rate that was given to you by the carrier and in the CDR against the rate tables within the XT software, we can show you again what the cost is based on the rate tables in XT versus the cost based on what was provided in that wireless telephone bill. Okay, so that again, phone company audit can be very helpful. The call activity by hour day, again, giving you that nice visual representation on inbound and outbound calls if I chose a graph, but again, inbound calls, I must not have selected any inbound as call class because there's zeros there. But from the outbound perspective, we can again get that idea on call volume. Sure, I didn't select all call classes. No, I didn't. So again, that can be a helpful report. If I select all call classes and I wanted to know inbound calls, my busy hour was, again, back there at 12:30. So again, very, very helpful report. Or stages. So you have your abandoned calls, your conference calls, voicemail calls, transferred calls, terminating calls, right? So if I want to know how many transfers took place by the operator over the course of the day, that's a simple report. Maybe it's just inbound calls, right? So I select incoming, run the report, and I could see that Elise Connors at extension 102 transferred one call today to John Smith, right? Maybe that's an instance of where employees need additional training because they're consistently transferring calls to other reps to handle the call volume, or maybe that's to be expected. And you want to make sure that all of those inbound calls were not only answered, but also transferred to the appropriate parties, right? So again, example of transfer terminating, very helpful. So if you're doing any sort of troubleshooting or have an instance where maybe one of your employees states, hey, I was on this telephone phone call with my client and it dropped, or they called in, it rang a couple times and I couldn't get to the phone in time, but it only rang 2 times. Why did it get cut off? It's supposed to ring 20 seconds like every other call. Well, you can go in and trace those calls by the user that's making that statement. Maybe it's by the hunt pilot, like the queue supervisors noticing that uh, calls seem to be becoming abandoned in our hunt group more frequently than before. What did you do to the phone system? Well, you could pull the group by hunt, run report to screen, pop up and see the reason that the call came into hunt group, 410, no error, so that's good. No error, that's good. And then the lookup here enables you to see maybe there's no route to destination, maybe all users are busy. These are just doing lookups based on the CDR termination code that would be provided by your PBX to give an indication on exactly what happened on that call. So this is just a strict lookup. I don't necessarily know what all of these mean. We could correlate that to the definition that's inside of the PBX CDR administrative guide and get some additional detail, but those vary by PBX or unified communication manufacturer. So again, this could be something you just plug into your user guide from your UCAS or unified communication solution and have some better knowledge on what exactly no route to destination means, right? Those reports by hunt group are helpful, but also trunk, right? If you're responsible for making sure that your business or your company has sufficient bandwidth and dial tone, maybe that's a report you bring in every so often, so to your meetings to say, hey, we need some more trunks, or we need some faster circuits or need to do some upgrades. Call the carrier. Other important reports could be dial number detail, frequently dialed, frequently used. These should be somewhat similar, familiar with. If you've used our Office Watch product line before, but you're just simply entering in a digit, a dial number, a caller ID, a partial number, wildcards. So if I wanted to know all calls received from a 404 area code, which is an area code of Atlanta, I would just enter 404. Everything else can be null. Maybe you have an instance where you know the area code, but don't know the NXX and know the last 3 digits of the phone number, or 4 digits. That would be an example of using wildcards in place of the actual digits that you don't know. Maybe you want to know all the times 911 was dialed. From the inbound perspective, the caller ID. So just like digits, so something to be cognizant of, digits are the same thing as caller ID, just depending on the direction of the call. So if I had all call classes selected, like incoming and outbound, and I were to enter in digits of 40423 or 2566512, not only is that going to report on all calls made to 404-256-6512, but calls received. Why is that really important? Well, a lot of times there's an abandoned phone call that came in from that number. You want to see other callbacks, right? What's that abandoned phone call followed up with? You don't have to run 2 reports. You just run report. Run the digit detail report, and you can see all the missed callbacks from abandoned calls. Or maybe you want to see a frequently dialed number report. Like you're, again, responsible for making sure that your phone's not hacked. Well, if you run the dial number detail report and leave this part null, this is going to sort the most frequently made or received calls. You start to notice, okay, we don't do business in Egypt, and this phone number was dialed 50 times today. Maybe that's an instance of your remote workers' soft phone being hacked, and you need to look into it. Or from a robo-dial perspective, maybe you notice a bunch of inbound calls coming in from a number that you don't recognize or in an area that you don't recognize. maybe that's another instance of you're on the list of potential toll fraud attempting hacking attempts or fraud um, solicitation attempts. You can always set those up in toll fraud in the future, so again you receive that alert. Go back here and let's see. I wanted to show the event trace by caller ID. I think that's also really important, and sequence number. So the event trace by caller ID is a helpful report if you wanted to report where there are greater than or less than a certain amount of events that took place on a call, like greater than or equal to. I can change the resolution on my monitor here so you can see everything here. But again, this could be very helpful. Show me where there's more than 5 events that took place on a call. An event meaning during the journey of a call, there are connected events, right, to where it's connecting to an extension. That extension doesn't necessarily have to be an extension of a user, right? That extension could be a CTI route point. That extension could be a virtual number. That extension could be a hunt pilot. It could be a call handler. It could be a key press, right? It could be a lot of different things depending on how your unified communication solution is configured to where if you wanted to know during that journey, there were 5 touch points and everything more than 5 is what I want to identify. This is where you would use that event trace by caller ID. So, and then I could also do it by phone number, right? So that could be a transfer to someone out of the contact center on event number 5 consistently, right? Since everybody's call flow is a little bit different on reaching the actual agent or reaching the actual user, or where there could be a transferred event, and this can be really helpful to rule out outliers or find outliers, right? So again, that's event trace by caller ID, which does go hand in hand with our sequence number reporting. So sequence number is a call ID. It's a unique identifier that your unified communication solution delivers in the CDR that enables the Office Watch software to group multiple legs of that call together by that call ID, right? It's like a primary key of a database, just giving us the ability to, again, filter on those calls associated with that one caller, right? So again, this works synonymously or very similar, at least, to the event trace by caller ID. Event trace by caller ID, and you just have to enter in the digits, right? As opposed to knowing what that call sequence number is, which you can identify in the other reports that are available here. Also, depending on your unified communication solution, there's a user login, right? So anytime you log in to the actual IP phone, the user name can show up in the CDR, right? So that could be an email address, it could be a login name. So if you have a shared line, for example, shared line meaning multiple users have the same extension, and you want to know who actually answered the phone, and you could do a login username detail and login username summary. Or you could also pull reports by device. Know a lot of times nowadays, employees or users have multiple different device types. So that could be a soft phone, it could be an IP phone, it could be an IP phone at the office, it could be an IP phone at the home, it could be a soft phone at the office, it could be a smartphone app, right? Phone identifier. So again, knowing what device the actual user was on when they made or received a call can be helpful for adoption analytics, but also knowing exactly which device they are on when you need to maybe do some troubleshooting or configuration when you notice some unusual activity. The custom reports, so again, you can build custom reports as needed, so you have the ability to pick and choose the columns that are relevant. You can sort, you can group, you can even build condition statements, and these condition statements are relevant in our other reports as well and templates. But you'll notice I don't need to be a SQL expert to build a query. I just need to know greater than or less than. It's like very simple. So show me where calls rang more than a certain amount of seconds and were abandoned. How do I do that? Well, rang more than, let's say 5 seconds. So greater than, more than, let's say 30 seconds, and had a call type of abandon. So again, you can set up your different conditions. You click OK, it builds your condition. Maybe it was extension 101. I click OK, builds that query for me, right? Query builder. and then you just run this report and it filters out just those events. Okay, so I'm going to go back and delete these and get rid of that. Click OK. Oh, yeah, get rid of that. I think that condition's still going to be there. Yep. Again, that's a condition statement. Then there's also recording of calls. So recording can be really helpful. Depending on the unified communication system you have, we can record the audio of a call, right? So it just uses SIP protocol and also RTP to whether or not we're using port mirroring or built-in bridge or whatever communication method that your unified communication solution supports for call recording. We can link those into a report or show them here as just the recorded calls. Everything I showed you here today is included within the XT product except for this call recording module. So definitely check with your account manager before assuming that this call recording option is enabled, because we're going to want to ask some very pertinent questions to ensure compatibility. The other additional option of the XT software is the alarm, instant alarm. So you'll notice that this emergency alarm has a duration, right? So I go back here and click edit duration. So call lasting X amount of duration. Well, how do you get a duration field if the call is delivered immediately? Well, you wouldn't, right? There'd be 0 duration. Well, if you wanted to know the duration of the call and you're okay with the call just being sent when the call concludes, meaning the call is hung up, XT2 out of the box with no emergency module will deliver that, after the call emergency alert. If you need the alert to be delivered immediately, meaning while the call is off hook, then we do have an instant 911 module that uses not CDR but a real-time CTI to deliver a notification immediately. So while the call is off hook, you receive that pop-up email and text message. And then after the call concludes, we deliver a second email or text message or pop-up with the duration of the call. So very helpful in identifying missed dials versus true emergencies, and the only the option in XT2 that is a module. So you have the instant module, which instant emergency module, which again is an additional feature, and then also that call recording module, which is a different feature. So again, everything else out of the box included with our software. If you have any questions or would like to set up a detailed demonstration with an account manager, please reach out to your reseller, reach out to your account manager, contact Metropolis. You can email us at sales2020@metropolis.com, and we're readily available to help you. So again, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.